I'd like to call the Joint Special School Building Committee to order. It's Thursday, March 28th, 2019. We're at the Nashua High School North Lecture Hall at 7 p.m. The clerk isn't here, so I'll take attendance at the moment. Alderman Dowd is here. Alderman Lizzie is on her way. Alderman Clee is sick. Alderman Jetty is not here. Here comes the clerk. Alderman Wilshire. Here. Mr. Garina.
Here.
Mr. Moja. Mrs. Raymond.
Here.
Mrs. Porter.
Here.
Mrs. Oden.
Here.
We have a quorum. Okay. As soon as the clerk is ready, he'll read the prayer.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and serious duty to manage the educational affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help us God.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We already took the roll call. Minutes. If there's no objection, we'll accept the minutes of the previous meeting of January 24th and place them on file. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Remarks by chairman. Okay, we're still in the infant phases of phase one of the middle school building project. Tonight there's going to be an overview from the architect as to where they're at. They have, I won't take too much thunder away from them, but they have visited the schools in question and started formulating data, and they will show you in their slides exactly where they're at. Okay. Remarks by school administration. Mr. Smith, anything?
Nothing tonight.
Nope. No checks?
Not yet.
Okay, now I can't see. Earn some light on, there we go. Okay, so again, tonight we're beginning an update from the architect. And with that, I will turn it over to Harriman.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jamie Willett, for those of you that recognize me or not. So yeah, we've been pretty active working on the report, the phase one report. We've done quite a few visits to sites. We've talked with quite a few individuals and groups, and so I'll start going through some of the information that we've have found so far. So one of our site visits was the facility analysis site visit. We visited all three schools, Pennachuck, Fairgrounds, and Elm Street. As you all pretty much aware, I think, is we did a facilities analysis report previously on Elm Street, but we wanted to visit it again, reassess where we are, make sure everything was still as it was last time we were there, and bring some new people that haven't been through. Things that we looked at were the building condition, looked at the structure of all the facilities, the different finishes and what conditions they were in. Looked for ADA compliance of the buildings, things that may or may not have fit into the requirements. Looked at different safety issues or concerns. Then we looked at the mechanical systems. We checked to see what types of systems were in each building, the age and the condition of all those systems, the capability of potential additions or renovations, if those systems would be able to handle any potential change. We looked at the plumbing and sprinkler systems. We checked the size of the system, sprinkler system, or the size of the capacity for water and drainage. We looked at the age of the system and the condition of it. We looked at the electrical and technology systems. What's the capacity of the existing electrical system and service coming into the building? As far as data and technology, we looked at those items, the age of the system, again, condition and the capabilities of all that. So that information is actually all compiled back at the office right now. We're all writing a report, or analysis report that will go into the final report to help make decisions further on down the road once we get to near the end of the phase. We also did a comparative facility tour where we took a day and walked through all three of the buildings. Donna was with us on that tour. The principals walked around their own school with us. And Rick also joined us for those tours. Some of the things we were looking at as we were doing these comparative tours, again, comparing one building to the next building to the next building to see what was different or what was the same, were things like safety and security items, like secure vestibules was one example, site circulation, and this is just a few items on each one of these out of the many different things we're looking at, but kind of some big highlights that we noticed. Educational adequacies, was the spaces that were there, did they fit the need for the educational spaces and were they adequate enough for what was needed for each one of those schools? Special education spaces, we looked at the sizes of them, the quality of them, the location, not written there, but location of where they were in respect to each classroom pod or age group or whatever it might be throughout those buildings. Capacities of the space, was the space, for instance, was the gymnasium big enough for the students that could, how many students would be able to fit in that particular gymnasium or cafeteria? We looked at the STEM CTE pathway, we also looked at STEM CTE pathway integration. How would that work in these particular buildings? We'll talk about that a little bit more in a later slide. And then we walked around the site, looked at the circulation, the fields, the parking. Mark, do you want to add anything to that particular?
I think the importance that we were looking at them is as we have contemplated the project as encompassing not simply just what happens with the Elm Street School, but really thinking about how does the project impact the others. And so if we're thinking about potentially 3 schools that are more equalized in their enrollment, what does it look like to change the enrollment of Pennachuck and Fairgrounds? And so it was through that lens that we were looking at this, and both the facilities piece as well as this comparative facility tour from the educational aspect of it, and thinking about how it is functioning currently to support the educational models, but also how is it going to be impacted with additional students too. So those really are kind of these 2 parallel paths that are tangent to each other. So I think that's really what we're trying to get at there. It was wonderful. We had wonderful tour guides on all 3. It was a lot of ground to cover to see all 3 in one day. Donna, you were a super trooper. I think we all got at least our 10,000 steps in that day. So it was wonderful. So this chart right here, we called it the program chart, but this is sort of building from what I just said, where we have current enrollments, the Pennachuck Fairgrounds and Elm Street, and looking at a proposed student count and in one scenario here. And so if we look at what we would need from the basic unit of the classroom to meet that enrollment, Pennachuck is the one where it requires the greatest number of new classrooms, but remember that this is sort of new to replace both the portables that are there as well as the increased enrollment that is being contemplated with this. And so that's why we've got 10 there. And if you look at the total square footage of the building, the building without the modulars, you understand that that's really the smallest of the schools. Fairgrounds is actually the square footage of the building fairly reasonable for an 800 student school in terms of, as we look at benchmarks, square foot numbers per student for a middle school. And so so the idea is that, and we looked at the class size of them, so we did a quick calculation in terms of the number of current classrooms, and if we looked at the increase in students from at Fairgrounds, approximately 100, and distributed that, it doesn't raise the incremental number of students in each classroom significantly. So that's why there's no proposed classrooms to meet that count at Fairgrounds. That doesn't mean that there's no work required there. That just means that that basic unit of the classrooms is sufficient to meet the increased population. And certainly Elm Street is larger right now than considering what an 800 would be for either the renovation of the existing or, again, contemplating a new site would be smaller than the existing school at Elm Street. One of the important considerations with, as I think you all know, with middle schools is this transition to the slightly larger academic unit going from classrooms to teams. And we looked at how the schools were set up to accommodate these teams. And Fairgrounds is actually fairly decent. So each of the 3 wings has a good-sized team area that, as we were walking around, was actually utilized in a collaborative way for breakout work by the students. The lockers were there. It really becomes the sort of home base for each of those 3 wings, which was great. Pennachuck was similarly organized in terms of teams, but it didn't have any of the common space, and the principal made comment to that. And we went to Pennachuck first before Fairgrounds, and it was lamented that they don't have. They have slightly enlarged corridor area in each of the team wings, but there really is no team home for each of those academic grade level teams. And that was really seen as an impediment to their operations. So, and then Elm Street in its current configuration was never designed for that type of an arrangement. So it is a very traditional corridor down the middle with classrooms on each side, and there is no common space for teams, and even the classrooms themselves don't lend themselves to organizing around a team structure because they're distributed across multiple floors and in multiple areas of the building. And so the current Elm Street model really, it's a junior high or a high school. It was as everyone knows, it was designed as a high school, but it doesn't support the middle school model that we use for social and emotional and academic development today. And then special education is one area that we're still working at. So we've are going through this process of what we call the educational programming, and we've started to analyze all these spaces. The one area that we're digging into a little bit deeper as of yet is, and Donna's helped set us up for the next meeting, we're going to take a deeper dive into the special education spaces and how they're being used. And that's,
speak up to the microphone, please.
I'm sorry. And that investigation or discussion is coming up shortly here. The next slide is a synopsis of a conversation we had with Amanda, who's the director of career technology at the high schools, and looking at right now what is offered at the middle schools for unified arts and the programs that they have, and the desire to align programs more with the high school career pathways. And so I think, as everyone knows, Nashua has a robust career technology program at the secondary level, mostly at the high school, which has a lot of really bright parts to it. And the idea is, how do we align the middle school so that some of that, the work that's being done at the high school and career technology education really starts to transcend down into the middle schools. And so what we find in education, if we can reach students at the middle school level, we have a much better chance of really keeping them engaged at the high school level. Oftentimes the high school slots are more difficult to fill, and students are either less interested at sort of at developmental point in time. So the idea of really reaching down with CTE at the middle school makes a lot of sense. And part of that is creating visibility of the career technology, and what most of the middle schools are set up as is having unified arts and the tech ed wing, if you will, that's very separate from the core spaces, academic spaces. So the idea is, how do we build greater visibility and more integration of those programs with some of the core academic program spaces? And that really starts to get at the movement we all hear about with STEM and STEAM, the idea that we're integrating cross-curricular content that creates greater relevance to the subject matter. And so that's some of the issues that we're trying to facilitate with potential renovations to it. And so some of that is simply, how do we create more visibility into these spaces? How do we make them more engaging or interesting, that students want to find out what those things are, what's going on in those rooms? And some of those creating collaborative spaces that we can engage both student work in career technology, but also in some of those other core content areas. And so that's some of the discussion points that we have taken away from that, and to consider those as we move forward with any proposed changes to the middle schools. So, Donna, you want anything else to add to that, or is that okay? Jamie, I'll turn it over to you for this next piece.
Yeah, I wanted to show, this is the Elm Street model that was actually in our proposal, and so it hasn't developed yet. We're not at that point. But I just wanted to remind people that, we're looking at a new security entrance and new admin, that sort of thing. That still holds. Part of that is that the portables would go away, and that little taller tower in the middle is additional classrooms. But if this ends up going toward more of a 800 student school, and we're remodeling Elm Street, that portion may or may not be needed. So again, I just want to share it just as a reminder, but it hasn't been further developed based on some of this investigation that we've done, or further investigation, I should say. So then again, this is another one out of that clip. It's the new site, what that might look like. It's conceptual, very early conceptual. We haven't done any further, is that the exact size it needs to be? Is this the exact spot it's going to be? Right now, I think Sean has sent out some proposals, or working on getting some proposals out to do the survey and investigation of the new site, some of the existing sites and stuff. So that all needs to be done before we actually pin where a new building might go on the site. So again, just as a reminder, I wanted to share that. But we have taken a look at Pennachuck and both fairgrounds we'll look at in a second, based on some of that investigation that I was talking about, and some of the stuff Mark was just talking about as well, as far as the CTE and where that might be and things like that. So at Pennachuck, we were talking about adding potentially 10 rooms, and again, this is very diagrammatic right now, just as some thought put on paper, basically. And so here you're talking about maybe I think we said 6 rooms, and I think it was 6 rooms or something like that. Somewhere in that range. This was before we knew that 10 was closer to the number, but and then putting a new team space, in there, that common team space area for the groups to work at. Maybe this is one of the more luxurious thoughts, but we'd had a maker space, as that CTE more central area. The ELL room has got some accessibility issues where there's steps in there and there's no way for students. It's really not a great ELL teaching space at this time. So we said, okay, what if that moved over to here and allowed some more room for some STEM down on this end? And maybe the library gets brought over to here when these modulars go away, and it can be a nice little area for, you could see that from the street and give you some visual interest at the building. Now, again, this is the higher thought. We have some other ones which I actually didn't put on these slides, but they're are step down. I just wanted to share with you that we're making some progress and thinking of some ideas, and all these would be outlined in the final report of what thought process would go, where. But anyway, so that's kind of what we're thinking here. And then fairgrounds, like Mark said, didn't need as extensive well, I shouldn't say it that way. It doesn't appear that it's going to need as much of a rehaul, but we're thinking, okay, well, right now we're looking at security, and right now you walk into the building and you have to walk down the hallway about 300 steps to get to the admin area. That doesn't seem like a real safe. That's not the current model of most schools that I see. In fact, when we worked at Sunset and Broad Street, we made sure that didn't happen, right? So here we said, okay, this gives us an opportunity to reconfigure some of this and maybe make this entrance a little more appealing potentially. Right now, it's kind of, it's just kind of, you can't really tell that it's an entrance unless you're really close to it. And then rework these areas. This was an area that was brought up as a really difficult area to teach in. In the art spaces, you can hear the teacher from one side to the other. And then the special education was put in there for the, it was a functional space created so that there was a space for students to have the special ed needs, but maybe this space gets reconfigured and reworked so that it's a little better teaching space. And then we talked about the common spaces, maker spaces and STEM integration and common teaching spaces. We think just reworking these a little bit, they work really well now, good spots. Maybe they just need a little touch to them to help them out. And then I think Mark brought up bringing the STEM as a more visible space. Right now you come down this corridor and they're all hidden back here. What if they were kind of a little more visible here so that students created more interest and were more interested in joining these type of programs? And then if we did that, we'd have to relocate a custodian closet. Again, these are they might be considered pie in the sky type ideas, but we're just thinking, putting stuff on paper so that we can, make progress here. Schedule. Just wanted to give everybody kind of an update where we are. Right now, we for educational planning, we're probably about 70% complete. Still have some ways to go. I mean, 30% is quite a bit left, and one of those items was to meet with the SPED director, and Donna has gone ahead and set that up for, I believe, next week to have our first discussion with them. Then the new versus reno analysis, like I mentioned, we had done our walkthrough and all that. Our report for that portion, the draft report, it's being worked on. It's probably looking like mid-April right now that will be ready for the draft, to be looked at. So hopefully next time we see you, we can at least talk about the analysis as a whole. And geotech and surveys, which I had mentioned earlier, probably mid-spring. Sean, does that seem about right?
Yeah, so the bids are due the next 2 weeks between those and the industrial hygienist. So this committee then has to award the bids.
Okay, thank you.
So that'll be the next joint special that we do that.
Okay, great. Concept design, initial concept ideas are in process, which you kind of saw some things that we were thinking about. Further design really goes up and through June, so it's a little ways out. We just got to have all the background information before we make final decisions going forward. And again, the final is with quotes around. It's not really the final, but financial analysis. We've got all the 90% of the background information. Sean and staff have given us quite a bit of information for that. So we'll be working on that, and that'll go right up through July. And then just to recap, for the report itself, the final report is expected to be ready in August. So, questions, or Mark, did you want to say something?
Just one thing before questions. I was with them when they went through the schools, and that's where I was shocked when I walked into the ELL classrooms and found the student ratio to teacher, and that's when I mentioned it to the mayor, and now we have that extra boost to do something about it. Also, when we did the walkthrough, there were closets that were still being used as closets that they put a desk in and have meetings with students. That's crazy in my book. So when we're looking at this, we certainly want to find spaces where that can be done in a more logical and reasonable way. Let's see. And the ELL space, the reason it's got steps, it used to be the music room. Music room been moved to another section, and of course, music rooms today, they want flat. They don't want those steps anymore, so. That room could probably be reconfigured at some point to get rid of the steps, because certainly don't need the steps for ELL, but you notice they're addressing ELL in their design. Okay. Questions for the architect? Oop, he did a perfect analysis, no questions. Good job. I assume that you don't have copies with you tonight of the presentation?
I don't.
Okay, I can send them out to everybody. I just got it this morning, so I'll send a copy to everyone. Mrs. Porter.
Thank you. Just because I don't know how this process goes, I know you mentioned you're meeting with Mrs. Fitzpatrick and also with the Director of Special Ed. When do teachers get a chance for their input before the design is finalized? And parents and students, actually.
Sure, absolutely. So the very first component of this is just for us to understand programmatically from our lens what the needs are. But the next piece after we get through this educational program analysis is to really open it up and have a much broader dialogue with both the community and with the schools themselves to understand from their perspective. It's amazing what you hear in the stories from everyone who's actually in there using them every day. They see things that we don't see walking around in a couple hours, and so. But it follows after we do this initial assessment of the educational program.
So once you do that, is that something you produce in a document that we would be able to see what the input was and
Yep.
how those are being addressed?
Yeah, what we'll do is we record the notes of those conversations, and so we camp out in the building, and we have a period of time where they come to us, and we are there, and we record all those comments. They actually get put in the appendix of the draft report, so it's something that you can go through and look at those. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So they'll be doing their analysis as they go along. They'll be bringing things back to this committee. And what we don't want to do is release too much information out to the public too early when things haven't been decided and people are getting concerned about things that may never happen. Mm-hmm. So as we go along in this process, we'll have public hearings, but we'll also have hearings within the schools and this to the full Board of Ed. And by the way, when we were going around touring, the teachers did provide inputs.
Yes, they did. I'm sure they did. They did. They're not a shy group, I know. Okay.
Sort of, they were sort of solicited, unsolicited, but believe me, they all had inputs every time we went into a classroom. Yes, Heather?
Thank you. I'm sure that's true. So I'm looking at the timeline. When you are soliciting these comments from the people actually in the building, is that in the fall? Or would that be between now and like mid-July when you were saying that the draft might come out?
So the draft is before that. So what we do is, in fact, at the Elm Street, we compiled the very same thing. These are listening sessions, so we don't promise anything. We listen to them. There's no options or schemes being developed. We just want to understand how the building currently supports the educational model and how they use it. And so that happens before summer of this year.
Okay, so pretty soon.
So there will be different aspects of the relo versus renovation versus new. Educational is one, cost certainly is another, and we'll be reviewing that here. But then there'll be a public hearing. Now, just for the record, if we decide to go to a new school, in the southern part of Nashua. This committee won't make any decisions relative to what gets done with that building, so don't get trapped into that. Someone else, I'm not sure who, but will be involved in what happens to the Elm Street building.
Oh, right.
There actually has been a lot of interest in it already, and we're not even anywhere near making that kind of a decision, so.
That's very exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing from the students and the teachers and the other people in the schools what's working well for them that they want to keep and to make sure that we, incorporate as we make the spaces better. So I always think that's a good place
Yeah,
to start.
As a Board of Ed, you want to realize that there's a lot of filtration that happens between the classroom teacher and the Board of Ed.
Yes.
Mr. Green?
I have comment.
Oh, all right, go ahead, Mr. Mosier.
Yes, Rick, I'm ready here.
Go ahead.
In the course of time, with all the other renovations that we had accomplished over the past few years, I think everybody has to be aware that as this plan and matures, that there's going to be a lot of decisions that have to be made as to what is going to take place and when and where and how it's going to be done. And, of course, it's not necessarily going to be up to anybody on the current Board of Ed or even with the aldermen, but it's going to be a consensus that best practice, which the Harriman will know and our construction people will know, and as we get along with everything, they will be able to present it, and we will have the revisions and the adjustments that have to be made. So I think that people have questions now, but they should sit on them for a while, because to say or do anything at this early stage would be premature.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mosier. Mr. Guarino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just wanted to make a comment about, I know that educational planning, you're focusing on the building and the layout of the building and everything there, but I would like to also know if you're looking at the whole site itself, to use all the opportunities, whether it's athletics. One of the science teachers at Elm Street actually takes her students out and walks down the street, and there's a huge pond, and they have a classroom in the outdoors. And I noticed there's some natural wetlands on that site. So this might be a little bit early, me making this comment, because I guess design is up in June, but I'd like to see some looking at the site, the whole site, and the opportunities there.
Mark?
Yeah, I'll just respond that absolutely. We're seeing more and more the importance of really thinking about not just what happens for learning inside of the building, but really the outdoor learning spaces are really important too, and the connections to nature and using the actual environment as a learning lab. So, great comment.
Mrs. Oden?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, would it be feasible at all to look at, rather than building out at Pennachuck, to building up?
I would say probably it could happen, but it's probably not going to be the most cost-effective option. You look at adding elevators and stairways that are not, they're not educational spaces. It's cost that goes into the building that really could have been used to add out. Now, if you were too tight on space and you didn't have quite the room to push out, you might have to consider that. But I think the first option would be to use the first floor level to help save costs. And it keeps the students all in, where they're in the right spots within the building. They're not having to traverse all these stairs and then go down to the cafeteria and whatnot, so.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to ask.
The answer is you could. I just think it's not the right,
It would cost more.
it would cost more.
That's what if it was new construction, would it cost more? Is it more costly because it's renovation?
It's a good question. There's cost added with that a second floor, but you're not, tearing off the roof to add a new. So it can be more cost effective to tighten that up. You're saving some energy costs because now you're putting, the building on top of itself and making it a little tighter. But you're not renovating. And so yes, it could be more cost effective to go second floor on a new construction because you're not having to do additional work above and beyond building new.
So the building was built as a one-story building, it's like turning a Volkswagen into a Cadillac. As soon as you took that option and handed it over to the construction manager, he'd have his calculator going 100 miles an hour, and that would preclude that. We're trying to get this done in a very cost-effective manner. By the way, the other piece of the puzzle on the alternatives, and all the alternatives, is life cycle cost. We want to minimize the cost to maintain these facilities going forward. So there'll be a lot of that in the report.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Construction manager have anything to add?
I'm good right now, thank you. My time will come.
Yeah. Okay, just, we sort of went over this the other night with the Performing Arts Center, but just to reiterate, the architect is going to make all the initial design options and works with this committee and others to come up with those design options. But then he turns it over to the construction manager, and that's where the cost gets added. So that's when possible changes come back, to when you look at the cost, because that can be, a big sticking factor. The one good thing is that the middle school project bonding is in the bonding schedule, and it's all planned for. So we'll just have to wait as they go through their initial stage, because we want to have all of the facts laid out before us in a document that says this is why we're going in this direction. Yeah. Nope. Oh. Oh.
For the record,
Long time since the Board of Ed.
For the record, if you could just note that Mr. Jetty and Alderman Jetty and I arrived, I think it was 7:05, 7:10, whatever, but just so that's noted. And my only request is that this presentation be attached to the minutes for this evening. And as we move forward, I don't want all the pictures, I don't need all the text, but if we could have like charts and the floor plans as you're moving forward, so we have a sense of what's going on and we can compare past to what's coming forward rather than accessing minutes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So bring them to the meeting is what you're suggesting?
Or Sean,
Or send them in
print
advance.
and send, I know sometimes you guys are doing things like 2 hours before the meeting.
Yeah.
And I understand that. So at least if they're available here so we can make reference and make notes
Okay. Yeah,
moving
absolutely.
forward. And again, we don't need all the pictures and whatever, but just the floor plans and any charts you have for us. That would be helpful. Thank you.
I have the PDF of this presentation in the right format, and we'll send it out to everyone tomorrow.
I made changes to it since you've seen it.
So you're going to send me the updated change? I know, I only
All I
got,
did was reorient the slides, but.
I was
So
getting
I
ready
would
to go to
just-
the gym when I was reviewing it this morning.
I would just say as long as Mr. Smith has the correct one to be attached to the minutes for this evening, so if people are following along with the notes.
I can send them first thing in the morning.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. So no other questions? All right, comments by members of the public? No? Comments by committee members? No? Okay, but as I said, they sort of laid out the schedule, and they're working to that schedule. And we'll have the intermediate reports, we'll be getting updates at every single joint special. And when decisions have to be made, they'll be made here first, but then we will, they're already working with the assistant superintendent for middle schools and the principals, and trust me, they had a lot of comments, and a lot of things they might want to change that probably will not end up as part of this, but may or may not, depending on the cost, but, okay. We don't need a non-public.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 7:41.